commercial basement applications, the National Electrical Code, or NEC, does not explicitly state a minimum height requirement for convenience receptacles. While the NEC provides extensive guidelines for electrical installations, including receptacle placement in various environments, the basement environment in commercial settings lacks a specific minimum height mandate for these outlets. Despite the absence of a strict NEC requirement, industry best practices and accessibility considerations often guide the installation height of convenience receptacles in commercial basements. It is common to install these receptacles at a height between 12 and 18 inches above the finished floor. This range balances accessibility for users with physical limitations, such as those using wheelchairs or other mobility devices, and protects the receptacles from potential water damage or debris accumulation on the floor. The rationale for this common practice is multifaceted. Firstly, installing receptacles at a slightly elevated height reduces the risk of water intrusion, which is a significant concern in basement environments prone to flooding or moisture accumulation. Secondly, raising the receptacles minimizes the likelihood of physical damage from equipment or objects moved across the floor. Thirdly, it enhances accessibility for individuals who may have difficulty bending or reaching low outlets. While the NEC serves as the primary standard for electrical installations, local building codes and regulations may impose additional requirements regarding the height of receptacles in commercial basements. These local codes often take into account specific environmental conditions or accessibility standards unique to the jurisdiction. It is essential to consult local building codes and regulations to ensure compliance with all applicable requirements. When planning the electrical layout for a commercial basement, several factors should be considered when determining the optimal height for convenience receptacles. These factors include the intended use of the space, the potential for water intrusion, the presence of equipment or machinery, and the accessibility needs of building occupants. For example, in a basement area used for storage or equipment maintenance, a slightly higher receptacle height may be desirable to protect against accidental damage. In contrast, in a basement area with frequent foot traffic or public access, accessibility considerations may warrant a lower receptacle height within the recommended range. In addition to height, other factors related to receptacle installation in commercial basements should also be addressed. These include the type of receptacle used, the wiring method, and the grounding requirements. Ground fault circuit interrupter, or GFCI, protection is typically required for receptacles installed in damp or wet locations, such as basements, to prevent electrical shock hazards. The wiring method should comply with NEC requirements for the specific type of construction and environmental conditions. Proper grounding is essential to ensure electrical safety and prevent equipment damage. It is important to note that while the NEC does not specify a minimum height for convenience receptacles in commercial basements, it does provide general guidelines for receptacle placement in other areas. For example, the NEC requires that receptacles be installed no more than 12 inches above the countertop in kitchen and bathroom areas. These guidelines reflect the need for convenient access to receptacles in areas where they are frequently used. Although these guidelines do not directly apply to commercial basements, they provide a general framework for considering receptacle placement in different environments. When installing convenience receptacles in a commercial basement, it is always recommended to consult with a qualified electrician or electrical engineer. These professionals can assess the specific conditions of the installation, determine the optimal receptacle height, and ensure compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. They can also provide guidance on other aspects of the electrical installation, such as wiring methods, grounding, and GFCI protection. In summary, while the NEC does not specify a minimum height for convenience receptacles in commercial basements, it is common practice to install them at a height of 12 to 18 inches above the floor for accessibility and safety reasons. Local building codes and regulations may impose additional requirements, and it is always recommended to consult with a qualified electrician to ensure compliance with all applicable standards. By following these guidelines, you can ensure that convenience receptacles in commercial basements are installed safely and effectively. Proper planning and installation of electrical systems are essential for the safe and efficient operation of any commercial building. Therefore, it is crucial to prioritize electrical safety and to consult with qualified professionals when making decisions about electrical installations. For clarity, let's reiterate some key points. Firstly, the National Electrical Code does not explicitly define a minimum height for convenience receptacles specifically within commercial basement settings. Secondly, despite the absence of a mandated minimum height in the NEC, a common and generally accepted practice is to install these receptacles at a height of 12 to 18 inches above the finished floor. Thirdly, this height range, from 12 to 18 inches, is often adopted to balance considerations of accessibility for individuals with mobility challenges, protection of the receptacles from potential water damage, and overall convenience. Fourthly, local building codes and regulations may introduce additional requirements concerning the placement and height of receptacles, so consulting these local regulations is crucial for compliance. Fifthly, a qualified electrician or electrical engineer should be consulted to assess the specific conditions of the installation, ensure adherence to all applicable codes, and provide guidance on best practices for electrical safety and functionality in the commercial basement environment. Now, let's consider some additional factors that may influence the optimal height selection for convenience receptacles in a commercial basement. One such factor is the primary function of the basement space. If the basement is primarily used for storage, a slightly higher receptacle placement might be preferred to minimize the risk of accidental damage from stored items or equipment being moved around. Conversely, if the basement serves as a workspace or a public access area, a height closer to the lower end of the 12 to 18-inch range might be more suitable to enhance accessibility for individuals with disabilities or those using mobility aids. Another consideration is the potential for moisture or water accumulation in the basement. Basements are inherently more susceptible to dampness or flooding compared to above-ground spaces. In areas prone to water intrusion, installing receptacles at the higher end of the recommended height range can help protect them from water damage and reduce the risk of electrical hazards. The type of equipment or machinery that will be used in the basement can also play a role in determining the optimal receptacle height. If heavy equipment or machinery will be frequently moved around, a slightly higher receptacle placement might be necessary to prevent accidental contact and potential damage to the receptacles or the equipment. Furthermore, the overall layout of the basement and the placement of other fixtures and equipment should be taken into account. Receptacles should be positioned in locations that are easily accessible and do not obstruct pathways or create tripping hazards. The spacing between receptacles should also comply with NEC requirements to ensure adequate access to power throughout the basement space. In addition to height considerations, it is essential to address other aspects of receptacle installation in commercial basements. The type of receptacle used should be appropriate for the intended application and comply with NEC requirements. For example, in areas where moisture is present, ground fault circuit interrupter or GFCI receptacles should be installed to provide enhanced protection against electrical shock hazards. The wiring method used to connect the receptacle should also comply with NEC requirements and be suitable for the specific type of construction and environmental conditions. Proper grounding is essential to ensure electrical safety and prevent equipment damage. All wiring and grounding connections should be made in accordance with NEC standards and inspected by a qualified electrician. Regular inspections and maintenance of electrical systems in commercial basements are crucial to ensure their continued safety and reliability. Receptacles should be periodically inspected for damage or wear, and any necessary repairs or replacement should be made promptly. Ground fault circuit interrupter or GFCI receptacles should be tested regularly to verify their proper operation. By following these guidelines and best practices, you can ensure that convenience receptacles in commercial basements are installed safely, effectively, and in compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. Remember, electrical safety should always be a top priority when planning and executing electrical installations in any type of building. Therefore, it is essential to consult with qualified professionals and adhere to established standards to minimize the risk of electrical hazards. Let's further elaborate on the importance of local codes and regulations in determining the appropriate height for convenience receptacles in commercial basements. While the National Electrical Code provides a comprehensive set of guidelines for electrical installations, it is not a substitute for local building codes and regulations, which may impose additional requirements or restrictions. Local codes are often tailored to address specific environmental conditions, accessibility standards, or other unique factors that are relevant to the jurisdiction. These codes may specify minimum or maximum heights for receptacles, require the use of specific types of receptacles, or mandate other safety measures that are not explicitly covered in the NEC. It is the responsibility of the building owner, contractor, or electrician to be familiar with and comply with all applicable local codes and regulations. Failure to do so can result in costly fines, project delays, or even legal liability. To ensure compliance, it is recommended to contact the local building department or electrical inspector to obtain information about the specific requirements for receptacle installations in commercial basements. These officials can provide guidance on the interpretation of the codes and help to identify any potential issues or conflicts. In some cases, local codes may reference or adopt specific accessibility standards, such as the Americans with Disabilities Act or ADA accessibility guidelines. These guidelines provide detailed specifications for the placement and accessibility of receptacles and other electrical fixtures in public accommodations and commercial facilities. Compliance with these guidelines is essential to ensure that buildings are accessible to individuals with disabilities. The Americans with Disabilities Act accessibility guidelines, or ADOG, specify requirements for the height and reach range of receptacles and other accessible elements. These guidelines typically require that receptacles be located no higher than 48 inches above the finished floor and no lower than 15 inches above the finished floor. However, there may be exceptions or variations depending on the specific application and the type of facility. It is important to consult the ADOG and any applicable local accessibility standards to determine the specific requirements for receptacle installations in commercial basements. In addition to local codes and accessibility standards, other factors may influence the selection of the optimal height for convenience receptacles in commercial basements. These factors may include the type of business or activity that will be conducted in the basement, the demographics of the building occupants, and the presence of any unique environmental conditions. For example, in a commercial basement that will be used as a daycare center or a children's play area, it may be desirable to install receptacles at a higher level to prevent children from tampering with them. In a basement that is prone to flooding or water damage, it may be necessary to install receptacles at a higher level to protect them from water intrusion. The specific needs and requirements of the building owner and occupant should be taken into account when making decisions about receptacle height and placement. It is always recommended to consult with a qualified electrician or electrical engineer to obtain expert advice and guidance. These professionals can assess the specific conditions of the installation, identify any potential challenges or concerns, and recommend the best solutions to ensure safety, accessibility, and compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. By taking a comprehensive approach to receptacle installation in commercial basements, you can create a safe and functional electrical system that meets the needs of the building owner and occupants. Remember, electrical safety should always be a top priority, and it is essential to consult with qualified professionals to ensure that all installations are performed in accordance with established standards and best practices. One more thing to consider is future adaptability. Commercial spaces often undergo renovations or changes in use over time. Installing receptacles at a height that accommodates a variety of potential uses can minimize the need for future electrical work.